Welcome to a very special edition of the Gospel Truth. I am now interviewing David and Tim Barton from 𝗤𝗏𝗆 Ministry, and they are just a tremendous resource on American history. And we're doing this in celebration of the 250th anniversary of this nation, and we're going back and straightening out a lot of the things that have been said, a lot of misinformation that has been given about our nation, and I tell you, this is super beneficial. So we're doing this for a 2-week period on my program, interviewing David and Tim Barton from 𝗤𝗏𝗆. So we're going to go right back into that interview and pick up where we left off.
Well, and it's worth noting too, for Lincoln, at the Lincoln Memorial, there's only 2 things inscribed in the Lincoln Memorial. On the left side is the Gettysburg Address, on the right side is the second inaugural address. But you actually can see the evidence of his faith after the Gettysburg Address in his second inaugural address, where it's in the Lincoln Memorial, there's 3 columns of his speech or of the address. And starting about midway down, he starts going through his Bible analysis of what's going on, that we're praying to the same God. And
North and South praying
North
the
and
same God.
South, God hears both of them. And I don't know that he's favoring one above the other. He says, but honestly, God might be waiting until enough blood has been shed from the soldiers to match all the blood that's been shed of the slaves that have gone before. And this might be God's kind of equity justice thing playing out. But again, what's worth noting is he quotes multiple verses in that. And where did Lincoln learn verses? Well, certainly probably when he's with Pastor Smith, he's learning verses. But I would back up and say when he first started memorizing verses that we know is when he was memorizing verses to debate pastors trying to disprove Christianity because he had been offended by his alcoholic, abusive father, and he's going to prove them wrong. But we know the Word of God doesn't return void. And
well, you know, while we're talking about the Civil War, I would like you guys to address this because one of the things that really impressed me is that the Republican Party was started for abolition, and there was one other thing. What was it? Polygamy of the Mormon Church?
Polygamy and abolition. Yeah. What happens is, as all this anti-slavery stuff is growing in Congress, and John Quincy Adams is leading the way, you have a number of anti-slavery parties. And so those anti-slavery parties, you have the emancipationists, the free soilers, you have different parties, even some of the anti-federalists were anti-slavery. And it really came to a series of laws passed by Congress. But 1850 is the big one. That's the Fugitive Slave Law. And that says even if you're a slave and you escape, you have to go back into slavery, which is crazy, anti-biblical, in the Bible.
And they had punishment for anybody who didn't enforce it.
They punished. And this is where so many people, that's where the Underground Railroad gets started. And it's not getting people out of slavery to the North. You have to leave the United States by and large. You got to get them out of the U.S., out of the jurisdiction of the federal government. Then in 1850, and I guess I should back up, say 1820, we had been going anti-slavery until 1820. And the Missouri Compromise said, hey, you know that Louisiana Territory we got that was going to be anti-slavery? Let's make part of it pro-slavery, and that was Missouri. So that's where you see the growth of slavery, 1820. Then you had the Fugitive Slave Law that even if they escape, you can go get them wherever they are. And then you get to 1854, and in 1854, the Kansas-Nebraska Act, because Kansas was supposed to be a free state. And the pro-slavery faction in Congress said, well, let's let them vote on that. We'll let them vote. And so here came all the pro-slavery guys from Missouri in there, and it led to bloody Kansas. And you had this big battle because if you're going to let anybody vote and you don't have to be in the state to be registered, you just come in from outside. And at that point is in May of 1854 when the Republican Party was started. They said, we've had enough of this nonsense. We're going to start something. And it was the twin pillars of barbarism is what they called it. It was slavery and polygamy. And those 2 things have to be stopped. And so that's where you see the start of the Republican parties in 1854. It maintained that anti-slavery position all the way through. When there were in the 1856 platform for Republicans, which we don't have it here, but we have that. That's the first Republican presidential candidate, Fremont. He didn't win, Buchanan won, but there were only 9 planks in the platform, and 7 of the 9 were civil rights and in slavery. Then you get to Lincoln's election. In Lincoln's election, 1860, we have the platform from Republicans, Democrats. Lincoln's platform, 1860, had 17 planks, and 11 of the 17 dealt with ending slavery and civil rights. So the Republicans absolutely started as an anti-slavery party. As you go through, you'll find that when finally the 13th Amendment is passed to abolish slavery, 14th Amendment and 15th Amendment are passed giving blacks voting rights and equal rights. it's significant that as you look across the southern states, for example, our state of Texas, the first 42 blacks elected to office in Texas were all black Republicans. The first 190 blacks elected to office in South Carolina are all Republicans.
I would suspect that all blacks were Republicans after the Civil War.
They
How
were.
did they get changed over to being Democrats?
They got changed over to being Democrat and it's a slow process, it's little by little. They got changed over when it got to the point of really the early 1920s and 30s where Republicans were no longer winning elections. Democrats are in office, FDR's in office. You got to work with Democrats because there's no Republicans winning. And so at that point, FDR said, well, I can't get you civil rights, but I can get you money that will help. And so that's where you see the flow of money start coming in. And then at that point in time, it's a good while before you get another Republican president, but you do under Eisenhower, and then Eisenhower passes civil rights laws. And so that's where you see significant civil rights laws get passed. And it's just a difference going back forward.
Kennedy gets a lot of credit because it was during his time that it actually went into
and it was actually Eisenhower's law that he had introduced, and Kennedy voted against it. But after 1963, the Birmingham riots, Kennedy said, no, that's not right. So he changed positions, but he had been against it, but it did come from Eisenhower.
Well, and the initial shift was under FDR, but it still wasn't the majority of the black American population voting Democrat, because when Eisenhower gets elected, he has the majority of the black vote supporting him as Republican.
Of black vote.
It wasn't until LBJ came to power that the majority of the black vote shifted Democrat, but actually he was an incredibly racist guy. And he used politics, strategy, trickery. He said, we will do this war on poverty. And he says, we will have these people voting for us the rest of their life, and they won't even know what they're voting for. And I gave the very edited version.
I was fixing to say you whitewashed that because I've heard the quote, and today he would be lambasted.
Oh, well, the audio, people can get online and listen to the audio clip where he uses the derogatory word for black people and he curses with it. He says, I will have bleepity bleep voting for me for the rest of their life, and they won't even know why.
Votes with a great society.
And also
I do have to point out, when you go back to 1929, the Republican who ran there, Herbert Hoover, he sold them out. Blacks had been loyal to Republicans, and he made a bunch of promises he did not keep. And I put that totally on him. He did not keep his word, and that's when you see, but at that point, 79% of blacks still voted Republican when Herbert Hoover ran. So you start seeing shift after that, and then you have a long time with no Republicans.
Wow, that is phenomenal. So the Civil War and the racism that we see today, there were Jim Crow laws after the Civil War, and this was what? Were these
Jim Crow
Democrats
laws,
that were
go ahead.
Yeah, so one of the things that's worth pointing out is after you have the 13th, 14th, 15th Amendment, all of a sudden, when you have some of these southern states that arguably a significant, if not majority of their population had been enslaved and now have freedom and now can vote, all of a sudden, you now have these southern states that are becoming Republican states.
South Carolina and Georgia both had more freed slaves than there were whites in the state.
And
problem for the whites who
problem for the whites who were all Democrats.
And so one of the things that happens is that even though now there are federal laws saying that you can't hinder an individual U.S. citizen from voting, a black individual has all the rights a white person does, etc., they begin passing laws or attempting to hinder black people from voting. And at this point, this is also when you have presidents like Grant and others who are like, we're not putting up with that nonsense. And the U.S. military was literally sent down to some of these southern states to preserve these constitutional and inalienable bigger picture. These are God-given rights that are now politically protected under the Constitution.
And let me back up to say that we have the congressional records from 1875 where they had hearings on what was called the KKK, Ku Klux Klan. And the Klan was started in 1865 and 1866, and the testimony was very clear that it was to take back power from the Republicans, not from blacks, from Republicans. But if you're in the South, every black is a Republican. So,
and am I correct that the vice president of the Confederacy was the one who kind of started the Ku Klux Klan?
No, he was part of it. There were
very
others.
Supportive of it.
He was very supportive. Sure. Alexander Stephens of Georgia was very supportive, but so were others. And so we actually have a Klan card from 1868 that has photographs of 63 people on it that need to be hung by the Klan. And those 63 people are all the Republicans serving in the South Carolina legislature. There's 50 blacks and 13 whites, but they're all being sought by the Klan. So when you look at the lynchings of the Klan, you have a total of about 4,800 lynchings, but 1,300 of them were of white people, 3,500 were of black people. Most people have no clue today. So going back to that Jim Crow kind of stuff, once the Democrats take control again, they start passing all these laws.
Well, let's back up to where they take control, because one of the things that is significant is Republicans now are maintaining control, except there is a presidential election where there's no clear electoral winner. So it goes to the House. And at this point, the Democrats...
That's 𝗣𝗵𝗿𝗆 1876.
The Democrats, the House is split into kind of fragmented groups. And the Democrats make a deal and they say, okay, Republicans, we will give you the presidency if you agree to remove U.S. troops from our southern states. And they very much thoughtfully agreed to this and said, that's fine, we just want the presidency. So they remove Southern troops. When Southern troops are removed, that's when all these laws go really into effect, because now there's nobody there to enforce the 14th and 15th Amendment or any of the Reconstruction laws that were passed. And by the way, when at this point, it was so short-sighted what the Republicans did in Congress, because once you now have allowed these Southern states to enact these Jim Crow laws, they're stopping black people from voting, and now they're stopping black people from voting. These Southern states now become very strong Democrat, which means Democrats now have a strong control of Congress, and they regain the presidency. And every single one of the civil rights laws passed in Reconstruction were removed, revoked, or overturned by Democrats as soon as they had power again.
I tell you, if people understood history, I don't know how a Democrat would ever get elected.
Andrew will be right back after these messages.
I'd like to encourage you to take advantage of our daily devotion. This is something I wrote many years ago. I have a different devotion for every single day of the year, and I read these often, and I'm amazed at some of the things the Lord said through me. They're really, really good, and I believe it would bless you. So you can get this sent to you automatically. I encourage you to go to our website and sign up and get our daily devotion for every single day of the year.
And now, here's Andrew.
Going back to here, this is George Washington, 1796. He said, anyone who tried to remove religion and morality from public life cannot be called a patriot. Now you look at what they do trying to remove religion and morality from public life today by his standard.
Well, they try to remove Christianity, because I don't know they're trying to remove Islam today, which is a different conversation.
That's true.
The one religion that would kill them is the one they love.
That's right.
And
but it's also why we know that we are in the midst of a spiritual warfare in the midst of everything else. Because why would you do things so illogical that are detrimental to you? Well, it's because there's a thief, goes around like a roaring lion seeking those he might devour. He comes to steal, kill, and destroy. Not to derail too much, because we can talk about this even more tomorrow, because I do want to go back and finish some of the Civil War and the slavery thought and talk. One of the things, Dad, you mentioned, this was a huge step for America to actually be a nation that not just ended slavery. We were the only nation in the world that actually fought a war that was primarily white people against white people, and at the end they freed all the black people. And one of the narratives today, growing up in the South, and I'm sure all of us heard this in the South, well, it's states' rights. And because we are people that anytime somebody makes a claim, I'm always going to ask questions and go back to look for the original. And so when Lincoln first gets elected, he's elected on the Republican platform. The platform he's elected on is very clearly anti-slavery. And when he's elected in November, the first state that secedes is South Carolina. They secede in December. Lincoln's not even inaugurated till March of the following year. They're already leaving. There was 11 states that seceded. 5 of those states wrote what was called their secession documents, their Declaration of Causes. And their Declaration of Causes was like their version of the Declaration of Independence, where they would say, here's all the reasons we're leaving. And when people say, well, it was states' rights, I always ask, have you ever read their secession documents, their Declaration of Causes? Because we don't have to guess why they left. They literally said, here's the reasons we're leaving. And most people have never read those, even though they're readily available online. And South Carolina is the first state to secede. If you go back and read their document, it is so unequivocal. The reason they are separating, they said, it is so clear that when a Republican becomes elected, their number one goal and ambition is to end slavery. We cannot successfully maintain slaves in our state if we remain in union with them. We have to literally, this is the whole thing. They finished their declaration of causes saying, we invite all of the other southern slaveholding states to join us in forming a confederacy of slaveholding states. Now,
it's pretty clear.
The reason all of it matters is 5 of them wrote these documents. If you go read those 5 documents and just look every time they talk about slaves or slavery, and then look for every time they talk about rights. They mention slaves or slavery, I think it's 86 times, and they mention rights, I think it's like 16 times. And so it's not even a comparison, the number one reason, but I'll go further because when they mention rights those 16 times, if you read the context, what right are they actually talking about when they usually talk about rights? It was the rights to own slaves. Yeah. But the reason, again, this matters is because what Lincoln did today, there are many people that look and go, well, he was kind of a dictator, he was a tyrant, he was unconstitutional. Actually, not dissimilar to what some people would accuse Trump of doing today, where we have these no kings protests and rallies, and he's this dictator. No, actually, President Trump has been one of the most constitutional presidents we've seen maybe since Calvin Coolidge, how well he does following the Constitution, but the same thing with Lincoln. If you go back and study the story of what actually happened, when there are states actively in rebellion, the Constitution actually has a provision that no states can form a confederacy. That is literally in the Constitution. So if there are states doing what is unconstitutional, they're in rebellion to the Constitution, that gives him the authority to actually come in as the executive and rule over their rebellion.
So do you think that if Lincoln had lived and not have been assassinated, I've heard that he had a plan for Reconstruction.
And his was a much milder plan.
So what would have happened? What was
I
the
don't
plan?
think it would have worked because there was such hatred in so many places in the South, and they were so violent and willing to be violent. He would have had to go to force at some point. But he, bless him, it's an impossible situation to be where he was.
Well, to see that many people die, your own family, and know that this group is the one who caused it, to submit to them, I'm sure that people in their lifetime never got over all of it.
Well, he also, though, one of the cool things about Lincoln, as you mentioned, Dad, the story of Reverend Smith and kind of his comeback to faith, one of the really cool things, what is one of the last conversations he has with Mary Todd, talking about what do they want to do when they finish the presidency? Tell some of that story.
So after the war is over, because he gets assassinated like a week after the war is over. So 13th Amendment goes out, then they end the war, and then he gets assassinated. But he and Mary Todd were out on a carriage ride in Washington, D.C., and he was talking to Mary Todd and said, this war started before I even got here. I've known nothing in my presidency except a civil war. That's the only thing we've known. I don't know what we do now. I mean, what are we going to do? And so they decided, and he said, I want to go to Jerusalem. I want to walk in the footsteps of my Savior. I want to see where he walked.
Wow.
And so they had just made that decision, and he got assassinated that night after the decision.
Wow.
Yeah. So one of the last conversations on record that he had with Mary Todd is, I want to go be where Jesus was. I want to walk in his footsteps. But part of why,
he got that prayer answered.
He got to walk a lot closer than he thought he was going to with Jesus. But this is, again, like the last week and a half, we have been talking about the good things in America that are worth celebrating. And because the modern narrative is why America's bad and why all these people are bad, because we don't know the full story of Lincoln and the sacrifice and his commitment and what God did in his life, or the fact that America fought a war to end slavery, and we were the 4th major nation in the world to do this. Again, these are huge things as we are celebrating 250 years as a nation. There are not only so many incredible accomplishments we should be celebrating, but also the obvious moments that God intervened on behalf of the people of this nation for the good of this nation, where one of the things that I've heard it said many times, I think it's a really interesting kind of analogy, that Israel was a nation formed because God wanted to have a people. America was a nation formed by people who wanted to have God as their God.
That's good.
And this is what you see that is so unique about America. America's never been a perfect nation. We never will be, because we always have people in this nation.
That's the problem.
But we're a nation that unquestionably a perfect God used imperfect people and did amazing things in this nation that not only should be remembered, should be celebrated, and people should be honored for the part they played.
And the Israelis went into it kicking and screaming, rebelling at God. But this nation was started by people who wanted God.
Yes.
Asked Him. That's awesome. Let me just mention again that we've got these programs that have been recorded. And so this is a CD of these 2 weeks worth of programs. This is a DVD taken directly from our TV programs. This is a USB that will have the audio and the video on it. And then we're also giving you free, if you would like it free. If you want to give, we need people to help us pay for this, but we'll send it to you free and postpaid. And this is the thing about the Great Awakening, some words that the Lord gave me. And I believe, and the Bartons also agree, that we are already in the third Great Awakening. And one of the points we made on a previous broadcast when I had them come on back, I think it was in 2001, is that these great awakenings aren't just everybody in agreement and stuff. It splits the godly versus the ungodly, and they're messy. The first great awakening ended in a revolution, the second one in a civil war, and this third one, we don't know exactly all of the results, but we can certainly see our nation polarizing over it. And so just because you see a lot of ungodliness and people opposing the things that are happening does not mean that God isn't moving. I think we are seeing some of the most monumental changes in this nation that have ever taken place. I think that if the Lord tarries 100 years, we'll look back and people will look at this and think this was like the rebirth of this nation. It may not be the birth, but a rebirth coming back to things. And so there's some great things happening.
Yes, sir.
Advertise that book again that you were talking about.
Yeah, so the American Story, The Beginnings is the book that we highlight a lot of these stories, the Faith Foundation. It's all documented and footnoted. We don't want people to take our word for it. We show you literally where they wrote it, what letter, what document. But the American Story, The Beginnings at @wallbuilders.com is a great place to go learn more.
And you have a lot of other things besides just that one book.
I'll throw one out. The Founders Bible is we took the Founders' writings on verses they used and quoted and put it into the Bible's commentary. So that's where you find out that John Adams and other guys pointed Jeremiah 17:9 is why we have separation of powers, or Isaiah 33:22 is the three branches. So it's a fun look to see the Bible applied to shaping America in so many areas.
That's awesome. So we are going to still have them with us for a couple of more days this week, and so I encourage you to listen. But then please get these materials, go to 𝗏builders.com and take advantage of it. This is something that you need to really ingest so that it becomes a part of what you know about our history. Thank you all for being with us.
Yes, sir.
God bless you. We'll see you again tomorrow.
To get the teaching on today's program, call our helpline, visit our website, or scan the QR code on the screen.
Hello, this is Andrew, and I would like to encourage you to join with us and become a partner with us. You know, you can click right there on the screen, and that will take you directly to one of the links on our website where you can sign up and become a partner. You can call our helpline. The number will be on the screen. We're open 24/7, and we'll help you any way we can. And you can also scan the QR code, and that will also take you to where you can join with us and become a partner and help us to reach more people, reach farther and deeper with the gospel than we ever have before.